Welcome back to TCL Podcast here on Spotify and YouTube. I do have a Patreon that you can go and join for early access to episodes scheduled to come out. I also have a merch shop for all your true crime gear. For any update on my channel or social media, you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Now, with that being said, let's dive into today's episode. After all, that's the reason you clicked on my channel and podcast. Also, hit that like and subscribe button if you're watching from YouTube. Alright. So today we're going to be talking about a case that I first came across after watching Lifetime. Of course, this is how I somehow come across some of these cases. I'm still trying to find one of them, but anyway, my brain forgot title. However, today we're going to be talking about the Cleveland abductions, and for those of you that don't know, it's the murder of Michelle Knight, Amanda Berry, Gina DeJesus by Ariel Castro. Now, child abduction is a horrible crime that can leave its victims scarred for years. The case of Ariel Castro is no different. Between 2007 and 2004, Castro kidnapped three young women and held them against their will in his Cleveland home. They were 14-year-old Gina DeJesus, 17-year-old Amanda Berry, 21-year-old Michelle Knight. During their captivity, the young women were subjected to forced sexual contact, starvation, and other hellacious forms of physical activity. After being rescued, will tell law enforcement that Castro had impregnated her at least half a dozen times, inducing miscarriages through beatings and dumbbells and throwing her against a wall, and it was reported that she would have facial reconstruction surgery to repair the damages that he had done. And she also lost her hearing entirely in one ear. Michelle was forced to help deliver Berry's child, resurrecting it to keep when it stopped breathing. And despite multiple reports of strange behavior from neighbors, the one visit to the house by police on an unrelated matter, the women were not rescued on March 6, 2013, when he left one of his exits unsecured, allowing Amanda Berry to communicate with the neighbor through his screen door. So, with the help of two male neighbors, Amanda was able to escape through a hole that had been kicked through the door, and the neighbor called 911. Leading the rescue of Michelle and Gina. Since her rescue, Michelle has legally changed her name to Lilly. Where she had where she when she was while she was in captivity, her son was placed in foster care and adopted by his foster parents. She told People magazine that she would miss while she misses her son terribly, she has no desire to bring him into the aftermath of her abduction. Now, with that summary, let's dive into the details of the case. Well, how did Ariel Castro kidnap three girls and how they finally escaped? Well, they were held captive and tortured for 10 years in his home. Um, DeJesus, Knight, and Berry escaped in May 2013 and brought their kidnapper to justice. Some people, like Ariel Castro in Cleveland, Ohio, have committed acts so evil that it's difficult to think of them as anything other than monsters. A rapist, a kidnapper, a torturer. Castro held three women captive for a decade before they were able to break free. He would plead to Judge Michael Russo during his sentencing August 1st, 2013 in Cleveland, Ohio. And he was sentenced to life without parole plus 1,000 years for abducting three women between 2004 and 2002 and 2004. He would go on to say, "I am not a monster, I'm sick. I'm a person inside." And how did Castro victims end up here, and why did he kidnap him? Why don't we go back to his beginnings? Ariel Castro was born in Puerto Rico, July 10, 1960. He didn't begin his horrific activities overnight. It all started with his abusive relationship with his wife, Grimelda Figueroa. If I'm butchering that name up, I apologize in advance. I am terrible with names. The two would share a rocky marriage and later spend the mid 1990s after Castro subjecting her to four children to death threats and physical abuse, breaking his wife's nose and dislocating her shoulder twice. One time he beat her so bad that a blood clot formed in her brain. A 2005 court filing said that Castro abducts his daughters frequently and kept them from his wife. In 2004, he was working as a bus driver for the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. He left the child alone on the bus. He was fired in 2012 after doing the same thing again. So, despite his eh, volatility, his daughter Angie Craig has thought of him as a friendly, caring, and doting man who take her out for motorcycle rides and line up his kids up in the backyard for haircuts. But all that changed when she found the secret out, and she would say, "I wondered this whole time how he could be good to us, but he took three young women, little girls, someone else's baby away from these families over the years enough for the guilt to be free." So why don't we jump to the Cleveland abductions? Castro later claimed his crimes were those of opportunity. He saw the women as a perfect storm and was snatched his own agenda. When he would pick up his first victim in court, he said that he didn't plan it that day. It was just something that he had planned. And that he had went to the Family Dollar and he heard her say something that I didn't say. I didn't say I was going to find some women. It wasn't in my character. Yet enticed each victim with a cliche tactics, offering one a puppy, another a ride, and asking for last for help to lost for a lost child. He also took advantage of the fact that the three victims knew each other and one of his children. Now, Michelle Knight was Castro's first victim, and on August 23rd, 2002, on her way to a social services appointment about regaining custody of her young son, Knight couldn't find the building she was looking for and she asked several bystanders for help. But no one could point her in the right direction, and that's when she saw Castro. He offered her a lift and she recognized him. I feel asleep now. Um, and she recognized him as the father of someone she knew. So she agreed. But that was but he drove her in the wrong direction, claiming he had a puppy at his building house for her son. The passenger door of his car lacked a handle. She went into his house, walked up the stairs where he said the puppies were, and as soon as he reached the room on the second floor, he shut the he shut the door behind her. Knight wouldn't leave Seymour Avenue for 11 years. Amanda Berry was next. She was leaving her Burger King shift in 2003, and she was looking for a ride when she spotted Castro's familiar looking van. Like Knight, she remained in captivity until 2013. The last victim was 14-year-old Gina DeJesus. She was a friend of Castro's daughter Arlene, and she and Arlene plans to hang out fizzled, and the two went their separate ways on the spring day of 2004. DeJesus ran into her best friend's father, who said he could use some help finding Arlene, and DeJesus agreed and went back with Castro back to his house. Ironically, Castro's son Anthony, a student journalist, wrote an article about the missing family in the wake of her disappearance. He even interviewed her grieving mom, Nancy Roas, who said people are out watching out for each other's kids, and it's a shame that the tragedy had happened, and he really knows my neighbors. Bless their hearts, they've been great. So, what happened in the early days of captivity? Well, before it was raised, before it was raised, 2207 Seymour Avenue was a house of horrors were Castro's victims. The lives of the three victims were filled with horror and pain. He kept them restrained in the basement before he let them live upstairs. Still sequestered behind locked doors, often to holes to slide foods. They used plastic buckets as toilets, where Castro rarely emptied. And no, to make matters worse, Castro later played mind games with his victims. He would sometimes leave their door open to win their freedom when he inevitably caught them. He punished the girls with a beating. Meanwhile, instead of birthdays, Castro forced the women to celebrate their abduction day, cer- cer- yeah, ceremonying the anniversaries of their imprisonment. So year after year went by and punctuated frequent sexual and physical violence, and the women locked away on Seymour Avenue watched the world go by. Year after year, which they did. But he was generous enough to let them watch Prince William and Kate Middleton on their wedding day. Yeah, that was his generosity right there, right? So these three women learned a few things in the time: how to handle Castro, how to get a sense of what's happening in the house, and how to hide their inner feelings. They sensed that above all he was a sadist who craved their pain, and they learned to mask their feelings, to keep the turmoil hidden. They passed they passed the yeah, they passed years this way until something changed. Amanda Berry realized the years of rape had made her pregnant. What each woman faced from Castro. So, Ariel Castro looked in no way wanted a child in this horrific arrangement. He and Barry continued with the pregnancy. However, when went into labor, he forced her to give birth on the kiddie pool to avoid making a mess. Knight, who had a son of her own, assisted in delivery. Once the baby was delivered, healthy and any other, they cried in relief. The women lived as if they were in a dollhouse, together yet separate, and always at the hands of a man in control who came when and went when he pleased. Knight was typically kept with Gina DeJesus, but as the most rebellious of the group, she was often in trouble with Castro. He punished her by withholding food, restraining her with a support beam in the basement, and by frequent beatings and rapes. But he would continue her account. She was pregnant at least 6 times, but none came to term. Castro wouldn't let them, beating her so much she suffered permanent damage to her stomach. Meanwhile, Amanda Berry was kept in a small room, locked from the outside with a child, a daughter named Jocelyn, and they pretended to walk to school while trapped in a house. Berry trying her best to maintain a sense of normalcy. She even kept a journal of her life in the house and recorded each time Castro assaulted her. So DeJesus faced much the same fate as the other women. Her family continued to search for her, unaware the girl was not far from them, locked away in the house of a man they knew. Castro even ran to her mother and took out the missing persons flower and said she was distributing. In a sarcastic display of cruelty, he gave the flower to DeJesus and would go on to face and mirror back, yearning to be found. So let's go talk about their escape in 2013. Amanda Berry's frantic 911 moments after she escaped, it seemed like the women's imprisonment would never end. Year after year, and any hope of freedom dwindled. The family, on a warm day in May of 2013, after a decade, then finally, not family, I don't know why I said that. Then finally, in May of 2013, after a decade of kidnappings, everything changed. Tonight, the day felt eerie, and it was like if something was bound to happen. Casco would drive to nearby McDonald's, and he forgot to lock the door behind him. Little would run back up and say, "I don't find Daddy. Daddy's nowhere to be found. Daddy's car is gone." And for the first time in 10 years, Amanda's Berry's bedroom door would be unlocked and Ariel Castro was nowhere to be found. And she thought, should I chance it? If I'm going to do it, I need to do it now. She went to the front door. In which she unlocked, but wired in it with an alarm. She said that she was able to stick her arm out through the padlocked door and began screaming, "Somebody please help me, I'm Amanda Berry." She was able to flag down the pacifier, Charles Ramsey, who helped her break out at the door. Ramsey did call 911 and Berry pleaded, "I've been kidnapped, I've been missing for 10 years, and I'm free now." And she begged the dispatcher to please send some police to help her fellow prisoners at 2207 Seymour Avenue. When Michelle Knight heard the banging at the ground door, she was convinced Castro had returned home and caught Berry in her flight to freedom. She didn't realize she was finally free from Castro until the police stormed the house and she fell into their arms. Knight and DeJesus followed the officers out of the house, blinking in the Ohio sun, freeing for the first time in a decade. As Knight recalled, for the first time, she was actually able to sit outside, feel the sun, and it was so warm, um, that it was like God was shining a big bright light on her. Amanda Berry and Gina DeJesus also would give an interview to BBC. So let's talk about the end of Ariel Castro now. That same day the women earned their freedom, Castro lost his. Very ironic. Um, So he was arrested for aggravated murder, rape, and kidnapping. He testified on behalf during the trial, equal parts defiant and repentant. Castro painted himself and the three other women as victims of sexual addiction. He claimed that his crimes were not nearly as bad as it sounded to the victims. Most of his sex, most of the sex that went on in the house, probably all of it was consensual. Yeah, very Delulu, if you ask me. And these allegations about being forceful on them, that was totally wrong. Because there were times when they even asked me for sex. Many times, and I learned that these girls were not virgins. From their testimony, they had multiple partners before me, all three of them. That's messed up right there. But anyway, let's move on to his full testimony during the trial. Um, Knight testified against Castro using his name for the first time. Probably because she never to keep referred to his name to keep him from having power over her. She would tell him, "You took 11 years away from my life," and she would declare, and Castro would be sentenced to life plus 1,000 years. He lasted little than a month before his conditions bettered, and he committed suicide September 3rd, 2013, by hanging himself with bed sheets. Hmm. What about no? Let's move on to the life after the Cleveland kidnappings. G. Sorry, y'all. Gina DeJesus speaks out 5 years after her Cleveland abduction by Ariel Castro. After the trial, the three victims were rebuilding their lives. Michelle Knight went on to write a book about the ordeal, Finding Me, A Decade of Darkness, before changing her name to Lilly Rose Lee. She got married May 6, 2015, the second anniversary of her rescue, and she hopes to reunite with her son, but who was adopted in her absence when he comes to age. So she still sometimes is reminded about the horrific ordeal, and she says she still has triggers like certain smells, light fixtures, and chain pulls. She also can't stand the smell of Old Spice and Tommy Hilfiger cologne. When Castro used it to cover himself, meanwhile Amanda Berry hoped to find love and marriage. She lives with her daughter Jocelyn and has adjusted to her making her own decisions in life. She has recently worked on a TV segment about a missing person in Northeast Ohio. DeJesus, the last of his victims, wrote a memoir of Barry and their experience called Hope, a memoir of survival in Cleveland. She also joined the Northeast Amber Alert Committee, which she would help find missing people and support their families. DeJesus and Barry have not been in contact with Knight. According, mm, correction, her and Barry. I don't know if I said Knight or not, but anyway. Knight said, I'm letting them go their own way, and they're not letting me, and they're letting me go mine. In the end, I hope that we get back together soon. As for his home, and as for his home, it was demolished a few months after the revelation, and the Jesus ants got the man the excavator controls as the demolition as his claw. After reading the Ariel Castro in the Cleveland abductions, um, you can read more about the abusive mother, Louise Torrin, who helped kidnap and imprison children for over a decade. And you can then learn about Sally Horner, who's said to have helped in founding the infamous book Lolita. Alright, that is it for today's episode. I will see y'all next time. I hope y'all have a great day and enjoy this wonderful cold spring day.